Let's speak now to Jamie Jenkins, former head of health analysis at the ONS. Good morning, Jamie.
Good morning.
Welcome to the programme. As we were hearing from Tom there then, some big potential changes on the way. Just looking at the figures, they seem to be moving in the right direction for this to go ahead.
Yeah, all the data's kind of going in a positive direction. When the First Minister said they would continue to look at the data a few weeks ago, when they announced that they would potentially ease a lot of the restrictions on Saturday, things have actually improved even since the kind of easing of restrictions in the last kind of wave of looking at the kind of the data and discussions by the First Minister. So I think what the First Minister and the other ministers will be looking at as well is what's happened in England since Freedom Day or in July there. And things have improved in England as well. And Nicola Sturgeon in Scotland has kind of announced that similar measures are going to be happening in Scotland soon as well, with the data improving there. It's not just kind of isolated parts of Wales that are improving. We're generally seeing improvements across the board. In part, there's a few reasons for this. We've seen a reduction in testing as well since kind of the schools have been closed. There was a lot of tests going on there. So the schools being closed has probably reduced some of the spread of the virus, and it's probably now the best time to do that with the school holidays as well, in terms of opening up and easing restrictions. And we'll be able to see the impact as children go back to school earlier in Scotland. They'll be going back in a few weeks' time. So we'll be able to see any impact of that happening and Scotland unlocking before kind of that thing happens in Wales as well.
Yeah, and it's not just the sort of case numbers and COVID deaths that the Welsh Government will be looking. A big part of this as well, which brings in the vaccination programmes, is how many people end up in hospital with COVID.
Yeah, and the vaccine's clearly showing the effect there, because if you track kind of the last wave of the virus and the recent wave of the virus, we've seen significant reductions in people going into hospital. There's two reasons for that. One is the protection stops you getting seriously ill. So we've seen about 80% reduction. But also what we saw in previous waves is when we saw cases rise in younger people, we did see them rise quite quickly in older people as well. For the most recent wave, we didn't see that because, remember, many parts of Wales, we've had double jabbed for older people many, many months ago. So there's been that vaccine protection. And then the death figures are significantly lower as well, about 90% lower when you look at the number of cases. And so it's starting. They're not seeing a huge creep up of first doses now. They're kind of levelling off at the moment. So if you take the youngest age group, 18 to 29, we've got 75% of them have had a first dose of the vaccine. It's only going up slowly, but it's ahead of England in terms of where the numbers are there. So the vaccination rollout is looking pretty positive as well.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, you touched on it briefly in your first answer. Now is a good time. It's summer. Lots of things are happening outdoors. Schools, children are on the summer holidays at the moment, so that reduces the risk in that environment. When the ministers are looking at making these decisions, how confident do you think they'll be when we're sort of easing these restrictions and heading into autumn, that we won't face a backtrack and have to face our restrictions being tightened again?
So I think this is where kind of politics probably starts coming into play, because England have gone ahead and eased all the restrictions. Scotland are doing that. So it's very difficult for Wales kind of not to follow suit, especially by the way the data is. Now, if we look at last year, we did start seeing cases rise in September, and that coincided with the schools returning and then universities returning. But I think the important difference this year compared to last year is the vaccination rollout, because obviously last year there was very little protection, but the data from the Office for National Statistics shows that, you know, over 90% of adults now have antibodies. So I think what will probably be difficult this time is if we start seeing cases rise as we go into the autumn and winter, whereas last year was probably more of a fast reaction to put some restrictions in. We had local lockdowns in Wales, then we had kind of a national lockdown. I don't think looking at cases alone, and given that we know that significantly fewer people have gone into hospital and died from COVID for the latest wave with the vaccine rollout, I think that's going to be the difference this time. It's difficult to predict exactly what will happen, but with the vaccine rollout, it should reduce pressure on the NHS. And obviously, there's talk of having booster jabs as well for some of the more vulnerable people.
Well, Jamie, thank you very much for that. Some really useful information this morning. That's Jamie Jenkins, former head of health analysis at the ONS.